She found him in a fog so thick it swallowed sound, sitting in a spreading pool of his own blood and cradling his dying mother like she was the only thing keeping him human. He was bleeding out and there was a gun resting against his thigh. The October fog had been rolling through Chicago's South Side for 6 hours straight. The kind of suffocating fog that turned familiar streets into labyrinths and muffled screams into whispers. Janice Kent felt the damp cold seep through her scrubs as she cut through the alley shortcut, her medical bag bouncing against her hip. The distant streetlight barely penetrated the gray wall of mist. Her phone screen glowed 2:47 a.m. She'd been at County Hospital since yesterday afternoon, a double shift that had turned into 16 hours when 2 gunshot victims crashed through the ER doors at midnight. She'd started her nursing career with dreams of saving everyone, believing she could outrun the memory of her sister Maya gasping for air on a bathroom floor while Janice fumbled with a phone 3 years ago. Medical school had been the plan once, 2 years in before student loans, and then grief made the decision for her. In the end, she'd chosen the ER where she could lose herself in other people's emergencies and never think about her own failure. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, still sticky with the blood of a stabbing victim from hours earlier. The stethoscope around her neck felt heavier than usual, like it knew what was coming. She almost missed the alley entirely, would have if not for the sound. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you are watching from, hit the subscribe button and turn on post notification as I have another beautiful story for you tomorrow and I do not want you to miss it. Not a scream. Not a gunshot. Something worse. A low, guttural moan in a language she didn't speak, and beneath it the wet, rattling gasp of lungs filling with blood. Janice stopped. Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking, to let the fog swallow whatever horror waited in that darkness. She'd seen enough trauma tonight. She'd lost enough patience. She didn't need to find another stranger she couldn't save. But then she heard it again, that desperate drowning sound, and her sister's face flashed behind her eyes. The way Maya's lips had turned blue. The way Janice had frozen, paralyzed, useless. Her feet moved before her brain caught up. The fog parted like a curtain and Janice saw them. A man, maybe 30, slumped against the grimy brick wall of the abandoned warehouse. His suit was expensive, she could tell even through the blood, even in the dim light. Tailored black fabric now torn and soaked dark. 3 visible wounds, maybe more. His breathing was shallow, labored, the kind of breathing that meant minutes, not hours. But it was the woman in his arms that made Janice's heart stop. Elderly, fragile, wearing a floral blouse that was more red than pattern now. The man held her with a gentleness that didn't match the cold fury in his eyes, one arm cradling her head against his chest, the other hand pressed uselessly against the massive wound in her torso. The woman's eyes were half closed, her breathing so faint Janice could barely see her chest move. The man's gaze snapped to Janice and she saw his hand shift to the weapon at his side, a sleek black pistol that looked as expensive as his ruined suit. He didn't raise it. Didn't need to. The threat was clear in his eyes, in the way his jaw clenched, in the protective way he tightened his grip on the dying woman. Go. His voice was a rasp, accented, each word costing him. You didn't see this. Janice should have run. Should have backed away slowly, hands raised, and disappeared into the fog. Should have called 911 from 3 blocks away and let someone else deal with whatever gang violence or mob execution this clearly was. But the woman's lips moved. No sound came out, but Janice saw it, that desperate, silent plea. The same expression Maya had worn in those final seconds, when she'd reached for Janice's hand and found nothing. The woman's eyes found hers, and in them, Janice saw something that transcended language. Transcended the violence and the danger and the gun. A mother begging someone, anyone, to save her son. Janice's medical bag hit the wet pavement with a heavy thud. I'm a nurse, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She dropped to her knees, ignoring the cold water soaking through her scrubs, ignoring the gun, ignoring every survival instinct screaming at her to run. Let me help. The man's eyes widened, shock, suspicion, and something else. Something desperate. He should go, he said again, but this time it wasn't a command. It was a warning. A plea. Janice was already unzipping her bag, already reaching for the woman's throat to check her pulse. It was thready, barely there, fading fast. I should, Janice agreed, her fingers already assessing wounds, calculating blood loss, running through triage protocols. But I made that mistake once before. I'm not making it again. She looked up and met his eyes, dangerous, calculating, searching for deception, and held his gaze. So you can shoot me or you can let me try to save her. But decide fast because she doesn't have much time. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours he didn't move. The gun remained at his side. The fog swirled around them. The woman's breathing grew fainter. Then slowly he moved his hand away from the weapon. Save her, he whispered, and Janice heard the break crack in his voice, the shattering of whatever armor he wore. Please. Janice Kent had no idea that she'd just stepped into the world of the Korean Mafia. Had no idea that the man bleeding out in front of her controlled half of Chicago's underworld. Had no idea that by the time the sun rose, she'd have a dying woman's promise binding her soul, an impossible debt she could never repay, and a target on her back that would force her to become someone she'd never imagined. All she knew was that this time she wouldn't freeze. This time she wouldn't fail. This time she would save someone, or die trying. Janice's hands moved with practiced efficiency, even as her mind screamed at the impossibility of what she was attempting. The woman first, always the most critical patient first. She ripped open the floral blouse, exposing the sucking chest wound that whistled with each shallow breath. Pneumothorax. The lung was collapsing, filling with blood. Occlusive dressing, Janice muttered to herself, tearing open a package of sterile gauze with her teeth. She pressed it against the wound, taping 3 sides to create a flutter valve. It was crude, temporary, but it might buy minutes. The woman's pulse was thready under her fingertips, 60 beats per minute and falling. Blood loss massive. Too much. She turned to the man whose eyes hadn't left his mother's face. You're hit too. Where? Doesn't matter. His voice was fading. It matters if you bleed out before I can move you both. Janice's hands were already on him, feeling through the soaked fabric. She found the wounds, left shoulder, right side, and there high on his inner thigh, the one that made her stomach drop. That's your femoral. You've got maybe 20 minutes. She packed the thigh wound with gauze, applying brutal pressure that made him grunt. The other 2 could wait. Had to wait. Janice sat back on her heels, her scrubs now as soaked as his suit, and made the calculation that would change everything. The woman needed a hospital, needed surgery, needed things Janice couldn't provide in an alley. But something about the expensive suit, the gun, the way he'd warned her away, involving police would get them both killed. She could see it in his eyes when she mentioned the femoral wound. He knew what this was. Knew who'd done it. I live 4 blocks from here, she said, the words coming out steady despite the insanity of what she was proposing. We move now or you both die here. Your choice. He looked at her for a long moment, searching for the trap, the betrayal. Then he looked at his mother, whose breathing had steadied slightly with the dressing, and made his decision. Help me up. The journey was a nightmare painted in shades of gray fog and red blood. Ohira, she didn't know his name yet, somehow found the strength to lift his mother, cradling her like a child while Janice supported his weight, her shoulder jammed under his armpit. Every step left a trail. Every breath he took sounded wetter, more labored. 2 more blocks, Janice whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was encouraging him or herself. The pre-dawn streets were mercifully empty, the fog their only witness. Her apartment building loomed ahead, a decrepit walk-up that had never looked so far away. They climbed the stairs in agonizing increments, and by the time Janice kicked open her door, Ohira's legs were buckling. She guided him to her threadbare couch, where he collapsed with his mother still in his arms, and Janice realized with cold clarity that she'd just invited death itself into her home. Janice cleared her kitchen table with one violent sweep of her arm, sending bills and takeout containers crashing to the floor. Put her here. Now. Ohira laid his mother down with a gentleness that broke through his deteriorating strength. Janice was already cutting away the blood-soaked clothing, exposing the full devastation of the chest wound. She'd known in the alley it was bad. Under the harsh fluorescent light of her kitchen, she could see it was impossible. The bullet had torn through the right lung and nicked the pulmonary artery. Blood filled the chest cavity faster than Janice could suction it with her inadequate supplies. She packed the wound, started in 4-line from her emergency kit, pushed fluids she knew wouldn't be enough. Her hands moved through protocols designed for golden hour trauma, but they were well past golden. They were in the red, in the dark, in the final minutes. Stay with me, Janice whispered, checking the woman's pupils. Fixed and dilated. Blood pressure dropping. Come on, stay with me. But Sai Ishida was already leaving. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening with that terrible clarity that sometimes came at the end. Her gaze found her son, who had dropped to his knees beside the table despite his own wounds, his hand clutching hers. "Ohira," she whispered, the Korean endearment barely audible. Then with visible effort she switched to English, her eyes moving to Janice. A good woman. Don't talk, Janice said, even though she knew it didn't matter anymore. Save your strength. But Sai's grip tightened on Janice's wrist with surprising strength, pulling her closer. Her other hand held her son's, connecting the three of them in a chain that felt ancient, binding, sacred. Promise me. Sai's voice was fading, each word a struggle. Protect him. Don't let die alone. Like his father. Promise. Janice looked into those dying eyes and saw her sister Maya, saw every patient she'd lost, saw every moment she'd been too slow, too scared, too human. But she also saw a mother's love, fierce and absolute, reaching across the threshold of death to secure her son's survival. I promise, Janice heard herself say, and the words felt like a brand searing into her soul. I swear it. Sai's grip relaxed. A small smile touched her lips. Good. Keep him human. The death rattle came then, that unmistakable sound Janice had heard too many times in the ear. Sai's chest rose once more, fell and didn't rise again. For a moment there was only silence. Then Ohira made a sound Janice had never heard another human make. A keening wail of grief so raw it seemed to tear from somewhere beyond his chest. He collapsed forward, gathering his mother's body to him, and the dangerous man with the cold eyes and the gun shattered completely, leaving only a son who had just watched his mother die. Janice stepped back, giving him that moment, and realized her face was wet with tears she couldn't remember shedding. She had just promised a dying woman to protect a man she didn't know, in a world she didn't understand, for reasons that transcended logic. And somehow she knew she would keep that promise even if it killed her. Janice wrapped Sai's body in her only clean bedsheet, her hands moving with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had done this too many times. She laid her gently on the narrow bed in the corner, then turned to face the man who was still bleeding out on her couch. Your turn, she said, her voice flat, empty of everything except purpose. Kitchen table. Now. Ohira looked at his mother one last time, then hauled himself up with visible effort. He made it 3 steps before his legs buckled. Janice caught him, surprisingly strong for her size, and half dragged him to the table she'd already cleared and disinfected with bleach. Lie down. Don't move unless I tell you to. She cut away his ruined suit jacket and shirt, exposing the full damage. 3 entry wounds. Left shoulder, through and through, muscle damage but no arterial hit. Right side, lodged against a rib, dangerous but survivable. Upper inner thigh, the femoral graze that had nearly killed him, still seeping despite the packing. Janice laid out her supplies with surgical precision. Forceps, hemostats, suture kit, local anesthetic she'd stolen from the hospital months ago for emergencies. A bottle of vodka for what the lidocaine couldn't cover. This is going to hurt, she said, not looking at his face as she irrigated the shoulder wound. I've had worse. His voice was steadier now, controlled. The grief locked away behind whatever walls men like him built to survive. I doubt that. Janice probed the side wound, feeling for the bullet against bone. This one's deep. You're going to feel everything. She didn't wait for permission. The forceps slid in, following the wound track, and Ohira's entire body went rigid. But he didn't cry out. Didn't even breathe until she extracted the flattened 9mm round and dropped it into a bowl with a wet clink. Why? He asked through clenched teeth as she sutured the wound closed. Why what? Why did you help us? You don't know who I am. What I am. Janice's hands didn't pause. I know you're a man who was shot protecting his mother. I know she died asking me to save you. That's all I need to know. That's not all. His eyes were sharp despite the pain, calculating, searching for deception. You knew not to call the police. You knew what this was. I guessed. She moved to the thigh wound, the most dangerous. Expensive suit, multiple gunshot wounds, you carrying a weapon. Doesn't take a genius. Most people would have run. Most people didn't promise your mother they'd protect you. Something shifted in his expression. You don't owe her anything. You don't owe me anything. That promise you can walk away. I won't stop you. Janice paused, meeting his eyes for the first time since she'd started working. Could you walk away from a promise you made to a dying woman? He held her gaze for a long moment. No. Then don't insult me by suggesting I could. She returned to the wound, her sutures tight and precise. Now tell me who did this to you. Because whoever it was will come looking to finish the job and I need to know what's coming. Ohira was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then finally, my name is Ohira Ishida. I run the Ishida family, one of the largest Korean syndicates in Chicago. Tonight, someone in my inner circle set up an ambush at my mother's favorite restaurant. They wanted us both dead. Why? Because in my world, family is weakness. Love is weakness. His jaw tightened. They were right. My mother wanted one normal dinner. One night where I was just her son. I gave her that. And it killed her. Janice tied off the final suture and covered the wound with clean gauze. It didn't kill her. A bullet killed her. And whoever fired it is going to answer for it. She helped him sit up, then looked him directly in the eyes. You're not dying today, Ohira Ishida. I made your mother a promise and I keep my promises. So rest, heal, and then we figure out who did this. For the first time since his mother died, something like respect flickered across his face. You're either very brave or very foolish, Janice Kent. She cleaned the blood from her hands and wondered if there was any difference anymore. By dawn, Ohira could sit up without his vision graying at the edges. Janice had forced antibiotics down his throat, changed his dressings twice, and monitored his vitals with the obsessive attention she usually reserved for critical ICU patients. Now she sat across from him at her small kitchen table, drinking instant coffee that tasted like battery acid, while he told her exactly how deep the water was that she'd waded into. The Ishida family controls the South Side, he said, his voice still rough but stronger. Legitimate businesses on the surface. Restaurants, import-export, real estate. Underneath, we handle everything the Irish and Italians won't touch. Protection, gambling, information. We don't deal drugs. We don't traffic people. Those are my rules. Very honorable for a crime lord, Janice said without inflection. A ghost of a smile. My father built this organization on honor. When he died, murdered by a rival faction 15 years ago, I was 20. Too young, everyone said. Too soft because I'd gone to university, because I read books, because I loved my mother. He paused. They were wrong about soft, but they were right that I loved her. That was my weakness. Love isn't weakness. In my world, it's a target. His fingers drummed against the table, the only outward sign of his rage. Last night was supposed to be simple. My mother's favorite restaurant in Chinatown, the one she'd gone to since she immigrated 40 years ago. No guards, no security. Just a son taking his elderly mother to dinner. I thought after 15 years I'd earned that much peace. Someone knew you'd be there. Someone close enough to know my schedule. My routines. My mother's birthday traditions. His jaw clenched. Jimwoo Park. My lieutenant. My childhood friend. The man I trusted more than anyone except her. Janice studied him over the rim of her mug. You're not certain. No. But he's been pushing for expansion into territories I refuse to touch. Drugs, human trafficking, profit over principle. We've argued. Publicly. Ohira's eyes went cold, distant. 3 weeks ago he asked me point blank if I'd step aside if the council demanded it. If I'd put the organization above my personal code. What did you say? I told him I'd die first. He laughed bitterly. He's simply accommodating my wishes. The magnitude of it settled over Janice like a physical weight. She'd inserted herself into a war between criminals, a power struggle where bullets were currency and loyalty was just another commodity to be bought or sold. Any sane person would walk away. Call the police anonymously, disappear, pray the fog of violence didn't follow her home. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Sai's face. Heard that dying plea. Felt the strength in those frail fingers as they'd gripped her wrist. If Jinwoo thinks you're dead, he'll move quickly to consolidate power, Janice said slowly. Within 48 hours. The council will meet. He'll present evidence of my death, claim leadership, and purge anyone who questions him. Then we have 48 hours to prove you're alive and he's a traitor. Ohira stared at her. You understand what you're saying? If you stay with me, you become a target. Jinwoo will send people to finish what they started. Professional people. And when they find you helped me. He stopped, something unreadable crossing his face. They'll make an example of you. Janice set down her mug with deliberate care. Your mother asked me to protect you. She didn't put conditions on it. Didn't say, only if it's safe, or only until it gets complicated. She asked and I promised. You barely knew her for 10 minutes. That's 9 minutes longer than I had with my sister before she died. The words came out sharper than she intended. I wasn't there for Maya when it mattered. But I'm here now. For your mother. For you. Something shifted in Ohira's expression, respect deepening into something she couldn't quite name. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who'd break. He leaned forward slightly, wincing at the pull of his sutures. You should be terrified. Instead, you're planning strategy. Oh, I'm terrified, Janice said quietly. But I made a promise to a dying woman. And I don't break my promises. Not anymore. Their eyes held across the table, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. An understanding forged in blood and oath, in shared grief and impossible choices. Then we fight, Ohira said finally. And if we survive, Janice Kent, you'll have earned a place in my world that no outsider has ever held. Janice thought about her sister's grave, about 3 years of punishing herself with impossible shifts and empty apartment, about the promise that had just rewritten her entire life. I don't want a place in your world, she said. I just want to keep my word. But even as she said it, she wondered if she was lying to herself. Janice walked into County Hospital's ER 36 hours after finding Ohira in that alley, and immediately knew something was wrong. The usual chaos felt different. Eyes tracked her movements, conversations stopped when she passed. She'd left Ohira hidden in her apartment with a burner phone and strict instructions not to open the door for anyone. Now she was beginning to think that had been a mistake. Nurse Kent. My office. Now. Dr. Raymond Cole stood in the doorway of the physician's lounge, his expression unreadable. He was 50, silver-haired, the kind of doctor who wore expensive watches and drove a car that shouldn't be possible on an ER supervisor's salary. Janice had never questioned it before. Now walking into his office, she questioned everything. Close the door, he said. She did, her pulse quickening. Cole leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Rough couple of days? Double shift 2 nights ago. You know how it is. I do. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Which is why I'm concerned. Your neighbor Mrs. Chun called the building manager yesterday. Said she heard unusual noises from your apartment early yesterday morning. Voices. Heavy footsteps. She was worried about you. Janice kept her face neutral. I had the TV on. Couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m.? Insomnia. Right. Cole picked up a tablet, scrolling through something. And your route home that night. You usually take the bus from 5th Street, correct? Usually. But not that night. I walked. Needed to clear my head. Through the South Side Industrial District? His eyes locked onto hers. That's quite a detour, Janice. Dangerous area, especially that time of night. Anyone would think you were looking for something. Or someone. The air in the office felt suddenly thin. What are you implying, Dr. Cole? I'm asking if you've treated anyone off the books recently. Because if you have, if you've brought unauthorized patients into your home or used hospital supplies for non-hospital purposes, that's grounds for immediate termination. And possibly criminal charges. Janice forced herself to breathe normally. I haven't. Good. Because we've had some unusual activity in this year lately. Patients coming in with injuries that don't match their stories. People asking questions about trauma protocols, about what gets reported and what doesn't. He set down the tablet. I'd hate to think one of my best nurses was involved in anything that could compromise this department. She should have left it alone. Should have nodded and walked out. But something in his tone, the careful precision of his questions, the way he'd known about her route, made her push back. Is there something specific you're concerned about, doctor? Cole's smile went cold. Just making sure we're all clear on our responsibilities. To the hospital. To our patients. To the proper authorities. He opened his office door, dismissing her. Stay safe out there, Janice. The South Side can be very dangerous for people who wander where they don't belong. She left his office with her hands trembling and her mind racing. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to be watching her. Enough to be asking questions that could get both her and O'Hara killed. That night, after her shift ended and the ER had quieted to its usual 2 a.m. lull, Janice used her security access to slip into the records room. She pulled files going back 6 months, cross-referencing dates and causes of death with news reports of gang violence and syndicate activity she'd researched on her phone. The pattern emerged like a disease spreading through tissue. Every 3 weeks, like clockwork. Accidental overdoses that showed injection sites inconsistent with self-administration. Gang violence victims with execution-style wounds. Car accidents with toxicology reports that didn't make sense. And every single one had been brought to county hospital. Every single one had been pronounced dead under Dr. Raymond Cole's supervision. Her supervisor wasn't just corrupt. He was Jean Wu's inside man, using the ER as a disposal site, signing death certificates for murders, making bodies disappear into the system. Janice's hands shook as she photographed the files with her phone. She'd thought she was protecting one man from one conspiracy. She'd stumbled into something far bigger. A network that reached into the institutions meant to heal, turning hospitals into graveyards and doctors into accomplices. And now they knew she knew. She made it 3 blocks from the hospital before she realized the black sedan was following her. Janice lost the sedan by ducking through an all-night convenience store and out the back delivery entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She took 3 different buses before finally making it back to her apartment, where O'Hara was waiting with a gun in his hand and questions in his eyes. She told him everything about Cole, showed him the photographs on her phone, and watched his expression darken with each image. "He's been cleaning up Jean Wu's messes for months," O'Hara said quietly. "Maybe years. There's more." Janice's voice was hollow. "I need to check something." She opened her laptop with trembling fingers and accessed the hospital database remotely, using credentials she probably shouldn't still have. The files she'd photographed had included dozens of suspicious deaths, but there was one more she needed to see. One she'd been too afraid to look for until now. Maya Kent. Date of death, October 15th, 3 years ago. Cause, accidental overdose. Janice had read this report 100 times in the weeks after her sister died, each word a knife to the chest. But she'd been drowning in grief then, unable to see past her own guilt at not being there, at not answering Maya's calls that day, at failing to save the one person who'd mattered most. Now she read it with a nurse's clinical eye and everything changed. The toxicology report showed a combination of fentanyl and midazolam, a pairing used in hospital settings for sedation, not recreational use. The injection site was noted as the antecubital fossa of the right arm, but Maya had been left-handed and the angle was wrong for self-administration. And there, buried in the trace compounds at the bottom of the 3rd page, was something Janice had missed entirely: vecuronium. A paralytic agent that had no business being in an overdose victim's system unless someone had wanted to make sure she couldn't fight back. Janice's vision blurred. Her hands went numb. The laptop screen swam before her eyes as 3 years of grief transformed into something infinitely more terrible: the certainty that her sister hadn't accidentally overdosed. Maya had been murdered. "Janice." O'Hara's voice came from far away. She pulled up Maya's work schedule from the hospital archives, cross-referencing it with the suspicious deaths in Cole's files. Her sister had been working as a medical records clerk 3 years ago, night shift, trying to save money for nursing school. October 14th, the night before she died, Maya had been on duty when a gang violence victim was brought in. A man Janice now recognized from news reports as a high-ranking member of a rival syndicate. Maya had filed an incident report the next morning. Irregularities in patient handling and documentation. Requesting review of death certificate procedures for trauma cases. She died 8 hours later. Janice found the death certificate. Signed by Dr. Raymond Cole. The sound that came from her throat wasn't a sob or a scream. It was something primal, torn from the place where grief and rage met and fused into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. Her sister hadn't died because of drugs or weakness or bad choices. Maya had died because she'd been good at her job, because she'd noticed something wrong, because she'd tried to do the right thing. She died because of Jean Wu Park and Raymond Cole. O'Hara's hand landed on her shoulder, steady and warm. "Tell me." So Janice told him, the words coming out flat and cold, each one a nail in a coffin she was building for the men who'd killed her sister. When she finished, she looked up at him, and he must have seen something in her eyes that even he found unsettling. "I kept your mother's promise," Janice said quietly. "Now you're going to help me keep one to my sister." "What promise?" "That I'd find the truth." She closed the laptop with a soft click. "And that I'd make them pay for what they did to her." O'Hara studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we hunt them together. For both our mothers. For your sister. For everyone they've destroyed." Janice felt something fundamental shift inside her. The last piece of the old, guilt-ridden nurse burning away, leaving someone harder, sharper, capable of walking into darkness and bringing justice with her. "Good," she said. "Because Jinwoo's council meeting is in 12 hours and I have a plan." "What kind of plan?" She smiled, and it was nothing like the smile of the woman who'd found them in that alley. The kind that requires a wire, a confession, and someone stupid enough to think they've already won. The burner phone buzzed at 4 a.m., shattering the tense silence of Janice's apartment. O'Hara answered it, listened for 30 seconds, then ended the call without speaking. His expression told Janice everything she needed to know. "Jinwoo's made his move," he said. "Emergency council meeting in 8 hours. He's telling them I'm dead, that he barely escaped the same ambush that killed me and my mother. He's positioning himself as the only leader who can prevent the family from falling into chaos. But you're alive. Once they see you, they won't. He's moving too fast, consolidating loyalists, neutralizing anyone who might question him." O'Hara's jaw tightened. "And there's more. He knows I survived. Knows someone helped me. He's put out word on the street. $100,000 for information leading to the nurse who's hiding the traitor." Janice felt the blood drain from her face. "How does he know I'm a nurse?" "Someone saw you. Or Cole told him." "Does it matter?" He moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. By now, every street hustler, gang affiliate, and desperate addict in the South Side knows there's a bounty on a nurse who treats people off the books. It's only a matter of time before. The building's fire alarm began to wail. O'Hara's hand went to his gun. "That's not a fire." Janice was already moving, stuffing her laptop and the photographed files into her backpack. "How many?" "Probably 6. 2 teams. Professional." He grabbed her arm, his grip urgent. "Is there another way out?" "Fire escape, but they'll have it covered." "Then we're trapped." "No." Janice's mind raced, pulling up blueprints she'd memorized during her hospital orientation 3 years ago. County Hospital is 4 blocks from here. The old St. Vincent's Medical Center closed 10 years ago, but the underground tunnel system connecting it to County was never sealed. They use it for storage. The entrance is in the building's basement, behind the old laundry room. O'Hara stared at her. "You're certain?" "I've used it to move supplies. It's how I got the antibiotics and equipment I've been using." She shouldered her backpack. "It's our only shot." They could hear footsteps now, heavy boots on the stairs, too many of them coming from both directions. O'Hara moved despite the pain of his barely healed wounds, and together they slipped into the hallway and down the back stairwell as the front door to her apartment exploded inward with a crash that made the walls shake. The basement was a maze of rusted pipes and forgotten storage, lit only by Janice's phone flashlight. She found the old laundry room, its door hanging crooked on broken hinges, and behind a stack of moldering boxes, the service entrance she'd discovered during a desperate hunt for medical supplies months ago. The tunnel was worse than she remembered. Narrow, dripping with condensation, the air thick with mold and decay. They ran hunched over. O'Hara's breathing labored, his hand pressed against his side where blood was beginning to seep through his shirt. Behind them she heard voices echoing, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. "How far?" O'Hara gasped. "Quarter mile. Maybe less." They emerged in an abandoned warehouse that had once served as medical supply storage for the old hospital. Boxes of expired equipment lined the walls, covered in dust and rat droppings. O'Hara pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quickly in Korean. "My people will meet us 3 blocks east," he said. "There's a safe house near the docks. Jinwoo doesn't know about it. I've kept it off the books for situations like this." Janice helped him toward the loading dock exit, his arm heavy across her shoulders. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough." He managed a grim smile. But I've survived worse. Thanks to you. They made it to the street just as headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness. But these weren't Jinwoo's men. These were Ohira's loyalists, the ones who'd believed he was dead until 30 seconds ago. As they climbed into the car, Janice looked back at her apartment building in the distance. Everything she'd owned was in there. Her whole life such as it was. But when she closed her eyes, all she saw was Maya's face and Sai's dying plea and the list of names in Dr. Cole's files. She'd lost her home. But she'd found her purpose. And Jinwoo Park had no idea what was coming for him. The safe house was a converted shipping office near the docks, sparse and cold, with reinforced doors and windows that had been blacked out years ago. Ohira's 3 remaining loyalists stood guard while Janice redressed his wounds and he made quiet calls to allies who still believed in the old codes, the old honor. By the time dawn broke gray and ugly over Lake Michigan, they had a partial picture of Jinwoo's support, and it was worse than they'd feared. He has the council, Ohira said, setting down his phone. Or enough of them. The ones who've wanted to expand into drugs and trafficking for years. I've been holding them back and they've resented it. Then we need proof he orchestrated the assassination, Janice said. She spread the photographs from the hospital files across the makeshift table. Death certificates, toxicology reports, Maya's incident report. This connects Cole to Jinwoo's operations. But it's not enough to prove he ordered the hit on you and your mother. We need a confession. From who? Jinwoo won't talk and Cole. Ohira stopped, seeing the expression on her face. No. Absolutely not. It's the only way. You go back to that hospital, Cole will know immediately. He's already suspicious. You show up after barely escaping an assassination attempt, asking questions, he'll have you killed before you reach the parking lot. Not if he thinks he's already won. Janice pulled out her phone, showing him the plan she'd been formulating since they'd escaped through the tunnels. Jinwoo's council meeting is in 6 hours. Cole will be confident, relaxed. He thinks you're dead and I'm running scared. I go back to the hospital, tell him I'm terrified, that I need protection, that I'll tell him everything I know about who you are and where you might have allies. If he'll guarantee my safety. He'll never believe you'd betray me. He'll believe I'm a frightened nurse who's in over her head and wants to survive. She met his eyes. Because that's what I should be. What anyone sane would be. I play desperate, offering information in exchange for protection, and while he's gloating about how he's tied up all the loose ends, I get him to confirm everything. The hospital murders, Maya's death, Jinwoo's orders. Ohira shook his head. It's too dangerous. If he suspects for 1 second. Then your people move in. You said you have someone inside the hospital security, someone Cole doesn't know about. They'll be watching. Listening. She pulled out the wire device one of the loyalists had provided. A tiny microphone that would clip inside her scrubs. The second I'm in danger, they extract me. And if they're not fast enough? Then I die doing something that matters. Janice's voice was steady, cold. Cole helped murder my sister. He's been facilitating Jinwoo's killings for years, turning a place meant to heal into an execution ground. If there's even a chance I can get evidence to destroy both of them, I'm taking it. This isn't about justice anymore. This is about revenge. Good. She looked at him, this dangerous man who'd wept over his mother's body, who'd trusted her with his life. Your mother asked me to keep you human. Maybe I need you to keep me human too. Because right now, all I feel is the need to make them pay. Ohira was silent for a long moment, something conflicted warring in his expression. Finally, he reached out and took her hand, his grip warm despite the cold of the safe house. My mother saw something in you that night, he said quietly. She knew you were strong enough to do what needed to be done. Strong enough to walk into darkness and come back. He squeezed her hand. But she also asked you to protect me. And if you die getting this confession, you break that promise. Then I won't die. Janice. I've spent 3 years punishing myself for not saving Maya. For not being there when she needed me. Tears burned behind her eyes but refused to fall. I can't save her now. But I can make sure her death meant something. That everyone who's died because of Cole and Jinwoo gets justice. That your mother's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Ohira pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers in a gesture so intimate it stole her breath. Then we do this together, he whispered. You get the confession. I bring down Jinwoo at the council meeting. And we both survived to see them answer for what they've done. Together, Janice agreed. For a moment they stayed like that, two people bound by death and promise, by grief and the desperate hope that maybe somehow they could forge something good from all this blood and darkness. Then Janice pulled back, clipped the wire to her scrubs, and prepared to walk back into the lion's den. Anise walked into County Hospital at 2 p.m., her hands shaking just enough to sell the performance. She found Dr. Cole in his office, reviewing charts, and when he looked up and saw her standing in his doorway, his expression flickered between surprise and calculation. "Nurse Kent. I thought you might have left town. I need to talk to you." She let her voice crack slightly. "About what happened. About who I've been hiding." Cole's eyes sharpened. He stood slowly, closed the door behind her, locked it. "I'm listening." "His name is Ohira Ishida. He's the head of the Korean syndicate. He was shot 3 nights ago along with his mother and I helped him. I didn't know who he was at first, but then," she wrapped her arms around herself, the picture of a terrified civilian in over her head. "He told me things. About his organization. About people who work for him." "What kind of people?" "People in hospitals. Police. City officials." She met his eyes. "He mentioned your name, Dr. Cole. Said you'd been helping his Lieutenant Jinwoo Park clean up problems for years. Bodies that needed to disappear. Death certificates that needed signing." Cole's face went very still. "That's a serious accusation." "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking for help." Janice moved closer, desperation bleeding into her voice. "Jinwoo's people are hunting me. They know I helped Ohira and they've put a bounty on my head. But if I give them information, if I tell them where Ohira's loyalists are, what his plans are, maybe Jinwoo will call them off. Maybe I can survive this. And you came to me because? Because Ohira said you were Jinwoo's man. That you'd know how to reach him, how to negotiate." She let tears well in her eyes. "Please. I just want this to be over. I want my life back." Cole studied her for a long moment, then smiled. It was the smile of a predator who just cornered wounded prey. "You poor stupid girl. You actually think Jinwoo would let you live after what you've seen? After what you know?" He moved behind his desk, relaxed now, confident. "There's no negotiation. No deal. You die, Ohira dies, and Jinwoo takes his rightful place at the head of the organization. So you do work for him." "I've worked for him for 5 years. Every loose end, every witness, every problem that needed to disappear, I handled it. Made it clean. Official." His arrogance was a living thing filling the room. "Including your sister." Janice went very still. "What did you say?" "Waya Kent. Medical records clerk. Filed an incident report about irregularities in a trauma case. Jinwoo ordered her eliminated and I made it look like an overdose. Neat. Simple. No questions asked." He leaned forward. "She died because she couldn't mind her own business. Just like you're going to die because you couldn't leave well enough alone. You murdered my sister. I eliminated a threat to the organization. There's a difference." Janice reached up slowly and touched the wire hidden beneath her scrubs. In her ear, Ohira's man whispered, "We have everything. Get out. Now." But Janice wasn't done. "You're wrong about one thing, Dr. Cole. I didn't come here to negotiate." She pulled out her phone, showed him the live recording indicator. "I came here to make you confess. And you just did. Every word. Every murder. All of it recorded and transmitted to Ohira's loyalists, who are about to walk into Jinwoo's council meeting with proof that he's been running an unsanctioned operation, using a corrupt doctor to facilitate murders, and ordering the execution of innocent civilians." Cole's face drained of color. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She tilted her head. "Why don't we go find out?" The door opened behind her. Ohira stood there, wounded but upright, flanked by 4 of his men. His eyes found hers, dark with something that might have been pride or might have been fear for what she'd just risked. "It's done," he said quietly. "The council has the recording. Jinwoo is finished." Cole lunged for his desk drawer, for a weapon, for a phone, for anything, but Ohira's men were faster. They had him on the floor in seconds, his hands zip-tied behind his back while he screamed threats that meant nothing anymore. Janice stepped over him without looking down and walked into Ohira's arms. She was shaking now, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her hollow and exhausted and somehow impossibly at peace. "Is it over?" she whispered. "It's over." But they both knew it wasn't. Not really. It was just the beginning. 6 months later, Janice stood in the doorway of her clinic and watched the morning light paint gold across the waiting room she'd built from nothing. The building had once been a shuttered urgent care center on the border between the South Side and Chinatown, neutral territory, O'Hara had called it when he'd helped her negotiate the lease. Now it was something entirely new, a place where gunshot wounds were treated without questions, where undocumented workers could bring their sick children, where the desperate and the dangerous could receive care without judgment or police reports. The sign above the door read, Kent Medical Services in English and Korean. Discreet, professional, and utterly unlike any practice the Illinois Medical Board had ever licensed. "You're here early." O'Hara's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar. He set 2 cups of coffee on the reception desk, moving with the easy grace of a man whose wounds had healed into scars he wore without shame. "Mrs. Park is bringing her grandson in at 7. Asthma attack last night. She was too afraid to go to the ER." Janice took the coffee, their fingers brushing in a gesture that had become routine over the months. "How did the council meeting go?" "Smoothly. The new trade agreements are in place and Jean Wu's remaining allies have been reassigned to less influential positions." His expression darkened briefly. Dr. Cole's testimony helped. "The prosecutor thinks they'll both get 20 years minimum." "Good." Janice felt nothing at the thought of Cole rotting in prison. The rage that had consumed her 6 months ago had burned itself out, leaving something colder and more permanent: resolve. She'd testified at both trials, her voice steady as she'd recounted finding O'Hara and Sai, discovering the hospital conspiracy, learning the truth about Maya's murder. The media had tried to paint her as a victim, a naive nurse caught up in gang violence. They had no idea how wrong they were. Janice Kent was no one's victim anymore. "I'm going to see Maya today," she said quietly. "After clinic hours. Will you come with me?" O'Hara studied her face, reading the vulnerability she only ever showed him. Of course. The day passed in the familiar rhythm of treating patients who existed in the spaces between legal and illegal, safe and dangerous. A construction worker with a cash-paid injury. A teenage girl fleeing an abusive home. 2 of O'Hara's men with knife wounds from a territorial dispute that had been resolved before it escalated. Each person who walked through her doors carried stories of survival, and Janice met them all with the same steady competence she'd once reserved for the ER. But this healing felt different. Purposeful. Clean. When the last patient left and the sun was setting over the city, O'Hara drove her to Graceland Cemetery. They walked together through the rows of headstones until they reached the modest marker that read, Maya Kent, beloved sister. Janice knelt in the grass, O'Hara standing silent guard behind her, and spoke to her sister for the first time in 3 years without the weight of guilt crushing her chest. "I found out what happened to you," she said softly. "I found the men who killed you and I made them answer for it. Cole's in prison. Jean Wu's in prison. Everyone who helped them is either locked up or scattered." She traced her fingers over Maya's name carved in granite. "I kept my promise, Maya. I found the truth. And I made them pay." The evening wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of autumn and change. "I'm not the same person I was when you died. I don't think you'd recognize me anymore." Janice smiled sadly. "But I think you'd be proud of what I've become. I'm still healing people. Just differently now. In places the light doesn't quite reach." O'Hara's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steady. "I met someone," Janice continued. "Someone who understands what it means to lose everything and have to rebuild from blood and promises. His mother made me swear to protect him, and in protecting him I found myself again." She stood slowly, O'Hara's arms sliding around her waist in a gesture of support and partnership that had evolved from obligation into something far more profound. "I don't carry guilt anymore, Maya. I carry purpose. I don't hide from the darkness. I walk into it with my eyes open and my hands ready to heal or fight whatever's needed." She touched the headstone one last time. "You'd probably tell me I'm crazy, that I should have run. But you always said I was stubborn." They walked back to the car together, 2 people bound by death and forged by choice, and as the city lights flickered to life around them, Janice felt something she hadn't felt in years: whole. She was a healer who'd learned to wield power. A fighter who'd never stopped believing in salvation. A woman who'd made a promise to a dying mother and in keeping it had saved herself. The world she inhabited now was dangerous, morally gray, built on compromises the old Janice would have found impossible. But it was also honest. A place where broken people could find healing, where justice existed outside courtrooms, where a nurse with blood on her hands could still save lives. Ohira drove them home through streets that belonged to both of them now. His by right of power, hers by right of choice. And when they arrived at the loft they shared above the clinic, Janice looked at this man who'd entered her life as a dying stranger and become her partner in every sense that mattered, and knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't trade this dangerous, impossible life for anything. She'd found her purpose in the darkness. And she'd learned that sometimes healing required getting your hands dirty. Sometimes keeping your promises meant becoming someone new. And sometimes, the only way to save yourself was to save someone else first.